On my 70th birthday, my own family walked away and left me alone. I thought the night was over, until a complete stranger sat beside me with a secret that changed my life forever. What happened next left my family shocked, regretful, and begging for a second chance. The restaurant had never felt so quiet. Soft piano music drifted through the air while families laughed around beautifully decorated tables. Balloons floated near the ceiling, candles flickered gently, and waiters carried trays filled with warm meals. At the corner table, beneath a large banner that read, "Happy 70th Birthday, Arthur," an old man sat alone. Arthur Bennett adjusted his neatly pressed navy blue jacket and glanced once again toward the entrance. "They're just running late," he whispered to himself. He smiled politely when a waitress walked over. "Would you like me to bring the cake now, sir?" Arthur shook his head. "No. My family will be here any minute." She nodded kindly. "Of course." 20 minutes passed, then 40, then an hour. Arthur checked his phone. No calls, no messages. Finally, a notification appeared. His heart lifted. It was from his oldest son, Michael. Arthur opened the message with trembling hands. "Dad, something came up. We won't be making it tonight. Happy birthday." That was it. No apology, no explanation, just 14 cold words. Arthur stared at the screen until the letters blurred. He looked around the restaurant. The decorations his granddaughter had supposedly picked out. The unopened birthday gifts he had wrapped for his grandchildren. The enormous cake with 70 candles waiting in the kitchen. Everything suddenly felt painfully meaningless. The waitress slowly approached again. "I'm so sorry, sir." Arthur forced a smile. "It happens. But it didn't. Not like this. Not after everything. 70 years. Arthur had spent 50 of them sacrificing everything for his family. He had worked double shifts at the steel factory. Missed birthdays. Skipped vacations. Sold his beloved motorcycle. Even mortgaged the family home so Michael could start his business. When his younger daughter Emily wanted to become a doctor, Arthur worked nights driving delivery trucks. When his youngest son Daniel got into legal trouble at 23, Arthur quietly paid every legal fee without telling anyone. Every decision he made had one purpose: his family. Yet tonight, none of them had found 2 hours to celebrate his birthday. Arthur quietly paid the restaurant bill, including every meal that had been prepared for people who never arrived. The manager tried to refuse. Arthur insisted. They cooked it. They deserved to be paid. Outside, the evening air felt colder than usual. He sat alone on a nearby park bench, holding the small birthday cake box the restaurant had packed for him. For the first time in years, Arthur cried, not loudly, just silent tears, the kind only truly lonely people understand. 10 minutes later, someone sat beside him. Arthur quickly wiped his eyes. A young woman, perhaps in her early 30s, wearing a long gray coat, smiled gently. "I hope you don't mind." Arthur shrugged. "It's a public bench." She noticed the birthday cake. "Birthday?" Arthur laughed bitterly. "It was supposed to be." She remained quiet. After a few moments she said softly, "My father also turned 70 once." Arthur looked toward her. "Once. He passed away 3 years later." "I'm sorry." "So am I." Silence settled again. Then she surprised him. "My name is Olivia." "Arthur." "I know." Arthur frowned. "You know me." She nodded. "I've been looking for you." Arthur's heartbeat quickened. "I'm afraid you've mistaken me for someone else." "No." She reached into her handbag. Slowly, carefully, she removed an old photograph. Arthur's hands began shaking before she even handed it over. The picture showed a much younger Arthur, standing beside a smiling woman, holding a newborn baby. Arthur's face turned pale. His voice almost disappeared. "Helen." Olivia nodded. "You remember her?" Arthur stared at the photograph. Helen Carter. The love of his life before he met his late wife, Margaret. Nearly 45 years ago. He hadn't spoken her name in decades. "I thought." Arthur swallowed hard. "I thought she had moved away." "She did," Olivia answered quietly. "She was already pregnant." Arthur froze. The world seemed to stop turning. "No." Olivia looked directly into his eyes. "Yes." Arthur couldn't breathe. Helen had disappeared shortly after Arthur left for military service. When he returned months later, she was gone. Her parents refused to tell him where she had gone. Eventually Arthur believed she had simply chosen another life. He married Margaret years later. Built a family. Buried the memories. Or at least, he thought he had. Olivia took another slow breath. "My mother never stopped loving you." Arthur's voice cracked. "Helen." She wanted to find you many times. Why didn't she? Olivia lowered her eyes. My grandfather hated you. Arthur frowned. He thought you abandoned her. I never knew she was pregnant. I know. Arthur looked up sharply. You know. Olivia smiled sadly. Because before my mother died, she finally told me everything. Arthur's entire body trembled. You mean? Olivia nodded. I'm your daughter. The words echoed through Arthur's mind. Your daughter. Your daughter. Your daughter. 70 years old. He had believed his family story was complete. Now, everything had changed. Arthur whispered, I have another child. Olivia smiled through tears. You always did. Arthur slowly reached toward her face. Then stopped. I'm afraid. Of what? That if I touch your hand, I'll wake up. Olivia gently placed her hand over his. You aren't dreaming, Dad. The word shattered something inside Arthur. Dad. No one had spoken it with such warmth in years. He burst into tears. So did Olivia. They embraced under the dim park lights while strangers quietly walked past, unaware that a father and daughter separated for 45 years had finally found each other. Hours later, they sat in a small coffee shop that stayed open all night. Arthur couldn't stop asking questions. What was your childhood like? Were you happy? What did you study? Do you have children? Olivia laughed through happy tears. One question at a time. She explained everything. Helen had worked 2 jobs. She never married. She raised Olivia alone. Every birthday, she showed Olivia Arthur's photograph. He loves you. He just doesn't know you exist. Those words became part of Olivia's childhood. When Helen became seriously ill, she handed Olivia a sealed envelope. Find your father. I don't want him to spend his last years believing he was unloved. Arthur covered his face. Helen had protected his memory. Even after believing he had abandoned her. I don't deserve that kindness. Olivia shook her head. She believed you deserved the truth. Arthur finally asked, how did you find me? Olivia smiled. It took 2 years. She had searched public records, old military documents, retirement files. Finally, a newspaper announcement. Arthur Bennett's 70th birthday celebration. She arrived hoping to surprise him. Instead, she found him sitting alone, waiting for a family that never came. Olivia quietly reached across the table. I almost walked away because I didn't want to interrupt. Arthur smiled sadly. I'm glad you didn't. You changed my life tonight. Arthur looked out the cafe window. For the first time in many years, his loneliness no longer felt permanent. But he had no idea that his own children were about to discover a truth that would shake their lives forever. Because someone else had seen Arthur and Olivia together that night. Someone carrying a camera. And by sunrise, a single photograph would begin spreading through town. The caption beneath it read, Lonely birthday ends with emotional reunion between elderly man and long-lost daughter. None of Arthur's children had seen it yet. But by the following afternoon, everything they believed about their father, and themselves, would begin to unravel. Arthur barely slept that night. Not because he was worried. Because for the first time in years, his heart felt full. As the morning sun streamed through the curtains of his modest home, he looked at the framed photograph Olivia had given him before they parted. It was a picture of Helen holding a little girl with bright eyes and a smile that looked exactly like his. My daughter, Arthur whispered, 70 years old, and life had given him one final surprise. His phone buzzed repeatedly. He ignored it. For years he had answered every call from his children within seconds. Whenever they needed money, advice, childcare, or someone to fix a broken appliance, Arthur was always available. But yesterday, when he had needed them the most, no one had come. Today, he decided they could wait. Across town, Michael sat in his office staring at his computer. His assistant rushed in. Sir, have you seen this? She showed him a local news website. The headline made his stomach drop. Elderly man abandoned on his 70th birthday finds his long-lost daughter in an unexpected reunion. There was a photograph. Arthur, smiling through tears as he hugged Olivia beneath the streetlights. Michael's face turned pale. His younger brother Daniel received the same article moments later. Emily saw it while waiting between patients at the hospital. Within an hour, all 3 siblings were calling each other. What have we done? Emily whispered. Michael rubbed his forehead. We were only going to postpone dinner. Daniel snapped. That isn't what people think. Michael closed his laptop. It doesn't matter what people think. Emily answered quietly. It matters what Dad felt. Silence filled the call. For the first time, none of them could defend themselves. Arthur spent the afternoon walking with Olivia through the botanical gardens. She laughed easily. She listened carefully. She asked questions no one had asked him in years. What was your favorite childhood memory? What did you dream about when you were 20? What made you fall in love with my mother? Arthur smiled. No one's asked me those questions in decades. Then I have a lot of catching up to do. They sat beside a peaceful pond. Olivia reached into her handbag once again. I almost forgot. She carefully removed a sealed envelope. The paper had yellowed with age. Across the front, written in elegant handwriting, were the words, "For Arthur, if fate ever brings you back into our lives." Arthur recognized the handwriting instantly. Helen. His hands trembled so badly he could barely break the seal. Inside was a letter. He unfolded it slowly. My dearest Arthur, if you're reading this, then Olivia found you. First, let me tell you something I should have said 45 years ago. I never believed you abandoned us. My father lied to both of us. He intercepted every letter you sent. He returned every letter I wrote. He wanted us separated because he believed you would never become successful. When I finally discovered the truth, too many years had already passed. By then, you had built another family. I refused to destroy the life you had created. So I made peace with loving you from afar. Arthur could no longer hold back his tears. Olivia quietly held his hand while he continued reading. I told Olivia about you every birthday. I wanted her to know she came from a good man. If she has found you, please don't spend a single day blaming yourself. None of this was your fault. Instead, love her. She has your kindness, your stubbornness, and your heart. There is one more thing you should know. Years ago, after my parents passed away, I inherited property that had belonged to our family for generations. I left everything to Olivia. Not because she needed the money, but because I wanted something that belonged to us to survive. Arthur folded the letter against his chest. I lost 45 years. Olivia smiled sadly. We can't change that. No, Arthur nodded, but we can protect the years we still have. Meanwhile, Michael drove straight to Arthur's house. No answer. Emily arrived minutes later. Then Daniel. The house was empty. A neighbor watering flowers walked over. Looking for your father. Michael nodded. Have you seen him? The elderly neighbor smiled. He finally looked happy this morning. Emily frowned. What do you mean? He left with a lovely young woman. Daniel muttered. That's probably the woman from the article. The neighbor looked directly at them. You kids should have been there yesterday. None of them replied. The old man continued. Your father spent an hour staring at the restaurant door. Emily lowered her head. He never complained. He just kept saying, they're coming. Michael felt sick. The neighbor sighed. I've known your father for 30 years. I've never seen anyone look that heartbroken. Without another word, the siblings quietly returned to their cars. For perhaps the first time in their adult lives, they realized their father had been lonely long before his birthday. They had simply never noticed. That evening, Arthur invited Olivia home. She stepped inside slowly. The living room was filled with photographs. Family vacations, graduations, wedding pictures, birthday celebrations. Yet Arthur noticed something. There wasn't a single photograph that showed only him with his children. Every picture revolved around someone else's milestone. Olivia gently picked up an old fishing rod displayed above the fireplace. You fish? I used to. When was the last time? Arthur thought carefully. About 15 years ago. Why did you stop? My grandson preferred video games. So, Arthur smiled sadly. I stopped going. Olivia looked at him. Dad, you spent your entire life becoming whoever everyone else needed. Arthur didn't answer. Because she was right. That night, Olivia cooked dinner. Nothing fancy. Just homemade chicken soup and fresh bread. Arthur laughed. I haven't had someone cook for me in years. She winked. Get used to it. His eyes filled again. Not because of the meal. Because someone wanted to share it with him. As they finished eating, another knock echoed through the house. Arthur opened the door. Michael, Emily, Daniel, all three stood silently on the porch. No one spoke for several seconds. Finally, Michael whispered, Dad. Arthur looked at them calmly. Yes. Emily's eyes filled with tears. We're so sorry. Arthur didn't respond. Instead, he quietly stepped aside. You may come in. The siblings entered. Then they saw Olivia. Confusion spread across every face. Michael looked toward Arthur. Dad, who is she? Arthur smiled gently. My daughter. The room fell completely silent. Daniel frowned. What? Arthur looked proudly toward Olivia. This is Olivia, your sister. No one moved. No one even seemed to breathe. And Arthur knew, the conversation that was about to begin would either heal his family or break it forever. The silence inside the living room felt endless. Michael stared at Olivia. Emily looked back and forth between Arthur and the woman she had never met. Daniel finally broke the silence. Dad, what do you mean, our sister? Arthur took a slow breath. It means exactly what I said. Olivia stepped forward with a gentle smile. My name is Olivia Carter. I found Dad yesterday. I've been looking for him for almost 2 years. No one spoke. Arthur quietly handed Helen's letter to Michael. Read it. Michael unfolded the worn paper with trembling hands. As he read, the color slowly drained from his face. When he finished, he passed it to Emily. By the time Daniel reached the last page, all 3 siblings had tears in their eyes. Emily looked toward Olivia. I'm so sorry. Olivia smiled kindly. You don't owe me an apology. Emily shook her head. No, we do. Arthur stood beside the fireplace. I never knew Helen was expecting a child. I believed she had chosen another life. For 45 years, I carried questions that could never be answered. He looked toward Olivia. And yesterday, on the loneliest night of my life, my daughter found me. No one missed the meaning behind those words. The loneliest night of my life. Michael lowered his head. Dad, we failed you. Arthur didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked to the family photo wall. There was a time when every one of you held my hand to cross the street. I remember teaching Michael how to ride a bicycle. I remember staying awake 3 nights beside Emily when she had pneumonia. I remember selling my fishing boat so Daniel could finish college. He smiled sadly. I remember everything. Then his smile faded. But somewhere along the way, you stopped remembering me. Daniel wiped his eyes. It wasn't intentional. Arthur nodded. I know. Neglect rarely is. It happens one postponed dinner. One missed phone call. One forgotten visit at a time. Until one day, a father is sitting alone at a birthday table, waiting. No one could look him in the eye. Finally, Olivia spoke softly. My mother used to tell me something. When people make mistakes, the important question isn't whether they cried afterward. It's whether they changed afterward. Arthur smiled proudly. That sounds like Helen. Olivia smiled back. It does. The conversation lasted late into the night. For the first time in years, no one checked their phone. No one rushed away. They simply listened. Michael admitted he had become consumed by growing his company. Emily confessed she always assumed someone else was visiting Dad. Daniel quietly admitted something that shocked everyone. I avoided coming here because every visit reminded me how much Dad had sacrificed for me. I felt guilty. Arthur looked at him with surprise. So instead of visiting, you stayed away. Daniel nodded through tears. I know how foolish that sounds. Arthur placed a hand on his shoulder. It sounds human. The following morning, Arthur woke earlier than usual. Instead of feeling tired, he felt peaceful. He walked into the kitchen and found Olivia making coffee. She laughed. I guessed you'd wake up early. You know me already. I'm learning. As they ate breakfast, Arthur looked out the window. I've spent years waiting for people to make time for me. I'm done waiting. Olivia raised an eyebrow. What does that mean? Arthur smiled. It means I'm finally going to live. Over the next few weeks, Arthur changed. He joined a photography club. He started fishing again. He volunteered twice a week at a community center, teaching woodworking to teenagers. He even booked the first vacation he'd taken entirely for himself. For years, every holiday had revolved around everyone else's schedule. Not anymore. His children noticed the difference. When they called, sometimes Arthur answered, sometimes he didn't. When they invited him over, occasionally he already had plans. Michael laughed one afternoon. I never thought Dad would be too busy for us. Olivia smiled. He isn't too busy. He's finally busy living. One Saturday afternoon, Arthur received an invitation from the community center. They wanted to honor him for mentoring local teenagers. The event would be held in the town hall. Olivia insisted he go. You deserve this. Arthur chuckled. I've never liked attention. Too bad. You've earned it. The hall was filled with people. Students, teachers, neighbors, families. Many of the teenagers Arthur had mentored stood proudly beside projects they had built under his guidance. Birdhouses, tables, wooden toys, bookshelves. One young man stepped onto the stage. My name is Ethan. A year ago, I was heading in the wrong direction. I had been arrested. I'd dropped out of school. Then Mr. Bennett taught me woodworking. He never judged me. He simply believed I could become better. My own father gave up on me. But Mr. Bennet didn't. The room erupted into applause. Arthur wiped away a tear. He had never realized how deeply he had affected others. Then the mayor stepped forward. We often celebrate successful people. But today, we celebrate a good man. A man whose greatest achievement isn't what he earned, but how many lives he quietly lifted. The audience stood. A standing ovation filled the hall. Arthur looked toward the front row. Michael, Emily, Daniel, Olivia, all four were clapping with tears in their eyes. After the ceremony, reporters surrounded Arthur. One asked, "What lesson has life taught you at 70? Arthur smiled thoughtfully. It taught me that love should never be postponed. Success can wait, meetings can wait, money can wait, but the people you love, they cannot." His words appeared in newspapers across the county the next morning. Thousands shared the interview online. Messages poured in from strangers thanking him for reminding them to call their parents. Arthur had unknowingly started a movement. That evening, the family gathered at Arthur's house again. This time, no one was forced to come. They wanted to. As dinner ended, Michael stood. "Dad, we've talked about this together." Arthur looked around the table. His children looked nervous. Michael placed an envelope in front of him. "We know we can't erase what happened, but we'd like to try making the future better." Arthur slowly opened the envelope. Inside were 4 airline tickets, a reservation for a lakeside cabin, and one handwritten note. No phones, no meetings, no excuses, just family. Arthur looked up, unable to speak. Emily smiled through tears. "It's your birthday trip, just a little late." Arthur laughed softly. It only took 70 years. Everyone laughed with him. For the first time in a very long time. It sounded like a real family. But none of them knew that the greatest surprise was still waiting. Because tucked inside Helen's old keepsake box, Olivia had discovered one final envelope. It contained a document that would reveal a promise Helen and Arthur had unknowingly made decades earlier, a promise that would change the Bennet family forever. The Bennet family had barely finished dinner when Olivia quietly carried a small wooden box into the living room. "I found this while sorting through Mom's belongings," she said. Arthur immediately recognized it. It was the same carved oak keepsake box he had given Helen when they were both in their 20s. His hands trembled as he gently opened it. Inside were faded photographs, dried flowers, old postcards, and dozens of letters tied together with a blue ribbon. Beneath them lay one final sealed envelope. Across the front, in Helen's elegant handwriting, were the words, "Please open this only after Arthur knows the truth." Arthur looked at Olivia. She nodded. "I've never opened it." With careful hands, Arthur broke the seal. "My dearest Arthur, if this letter has reached you, then life has finally corrected the mistake that kept us apart. I don't write this with sadness. I write it with gratitude. Because I know that if you're reading these words, our daughter has found her father. There is one final wish I hope you'll grant me. Please don't spend whatever years you have left mourning everything we lost. Celebrate everything you still have. Forgive yourself. Forgive those who hurt you. And remind our children, every one of them, that family is measured by love, not by blood or by time." Arthur stopped reading. Tears rolled silently down his cheeks. Olivia squeezed his hand. "Keep going." He nodded. The letter continued. "Years ago, I dreamed that one day we would build a small place where lonely people could come for a meal, a conversation, or simply a reminder that they mattered. Life never allowed us to build it together. Perhaps now, you can. If our daughter agrees, use everything I left behind to create something that outlives us both. Not a monument, a home, a place where no one spends their birthday alone. With all my love, Helen." The room fell silent. No one spoke for nearly a minute. Finally, Emily whispered. She was still thinking about other people. Arthur smiled through tears. "That's exactly who Helen was." Michael looked toward Olivia. "What do you think?" Olivia smiled. "I think Mom already knew what Dad's answer would be." Arthur laughed softly. She always did. Over the following months, the family worked together in a way they never had before. Michael handled the finances. Emily organized volunteers and healthcare support. Daniel oversaw renovations with local builders. Olivia left her consulting job to manage the project full-time. Arthur visited the building every day. An old community hall that had been empty for years slowly transformed into something beautiful. Warm wooden floors, a bright dining room, a cozy library, a small garden filled with roses, Helen's favorite flower. Above the entrance, a simple wooden sign read, "Helen's table, no one eats alone." The opening day exceeded every expectation. Dozens of elderly people arrived. Some had lost their spouses. Some had children living overseas. Others simply had nowhere else to go. There was no paperwork, no membership, no questions, only a warm meal, friendly conversation, and genuine kindness. Arthur personally greeted every guest. One elderly woman smiled nervously. "I wasn't sure if I should come." Arthur gently replied, "I'm very glad you did." Weeks turned into months. Helen's Table became more than a community center. It became a family. Birthdays were celebrated together. Teenagers volunteered after school. Local restaurants donated meals. Musicians performed on weekends. Doctors offered free health checkups. Neighbors who had never spoken before became close friends. Arthur often looked around the room and thought, "This is the birthday party I was waiting for." One afternoon, a familiar face quietly entered the building. It was the waitress from the restaurant where Arthur had spent his 70th birthday alone. She smiled as she recognized him. "I've been hoping I'd see you again." Arthur laughed. "I remember you." She looked around the busy dining room. "You seem different." Arthur nodded. "I am." She smiled. "I'm happy your story had a good ending." Arthur looked around the room. It wasn't the ending, it was the beginning. As the first anniversary of Helen's Table approached, the town organized a special celebration. Hundreds of people attended. The mayor unveiled a plaque that read, "Dedicated to Arthur Bennett and Helen Carter, whose kindness reminded us that love never arrives too late." Arthur quietly shook his head. "I don't need my name on a plaque." The mayor smiled. "It isn't for you, it's for the next generation. So they'll know what one act of kindness can become." That evening, the Bennett family gathered outside as the sun began to set. Michael stood beside his father. "Dad, I've been meaning to ask you something." Arthur smiled. "What is it? Can you forgive us?" Arthur looked at each of his children. He saw genuine regret, but more importantly, he saw change, not promises, actions. They had spent an entire year proving that family mattered again. Arthur placed a hand on Michael's shoulder. "I forgave you the moment you chose to come back." Emily embraced him tightly. "I love you, Dad." "I love you too." Daniel smiled. "I finally understand everything you sacrificed." Arthur chuckled. "I didn't make those sacrifices so you'd feel guilty. I made them because I loved you." Olivia quietly joined the group. She hesitated for a moment. "I've only known all of you for a year." Emily immediately took her hand. "You've been our sister from the moment Dad introduced you." Michael laughed. "I wish we'd met 45 years earlier." Olivia smiled. "So do I, but we still have today." A photographer asked the family to stand together. This time, Arthur stood in the center. Michael on one side, Emily beside him, Daniel with his arm around his father, Olivia holding Arthur's hand. The camera clicked. Arthur looked at the photograph afterward. For the first time in his life, every one of his children was beside him. Not separated by secrets, not distracted by busy schedules. Simply together. That night, after everyone had gone home, Arthur remained alone in the garden outside Helen's Table. He looked up at the stars. A gentle breeze moved through the roses. He smiled. "Thank you, Helen. Thank you for never giving up on me. And thank you for giving me Olivia." He closed his eyes for a moment. Not with sadness, with peace. Sometimes, life doesn't give us the years we expected. Sometimes it takes decades to reveal the truth. Sometimes the people who hurt us find the courage to change. And sometimes, a lonely birthday becomes the beginning of the happiest chapter of all. Arthur Bennett had started his 70th birthday believing he had been forgotten. He ended the following years surrounded by family, friends, laughter, and a community built on compassion. He learned that love can survive silence. Forgiveness can heal regret, and it is never too late to rebuild a family, if everyone is willing to begin again. The doors of Helen's Table had never closed for a single day. Every morning at exactly 8 o'clock, Arthur unlocked the front door with the same quiet smile. Before the first guest arrived, he would place a fresh rose beneath Helen's framed photograph. "Good morning," he whispered. Then another beautiful day would begin. The little dining hall that had started with a handful of lonely visitors was now filled almost every day. Volunteers packed meals, children laughed in the garden, and older guests sat together telling stories they thought no one would ever care to hear again. Arthur had finally found the family he never knew he needed. One rainy afternoon, a volunteer walked into Arthur's office. "Mr. Bennett, there's a gentleman outside asking for you." Arthur looked up from his paperwork. "Who is he?" He wouldn't give his name. He only said, "Tell Arthur I'm here to apologize." Arthur slowly walked toward the entrance. Standing beneath the rain, holding a worn leather bag, was an elderly man with white hair and tired eyes. Arthur stared for several seconds. Then he whispered, "Richard." The man lowered his head. It was Helen's older brother. The same man who had disappeared from Arthur's life more than 45 years ago. Richard stepped inside. "I wasn't sure you'd let me in," Arthur quietly replied. "This place was built for second chances." The old man broke down in tears. "I've carried this guilt for half my life." Arthur guided him to a chair. After several moments, Richard finally spoke. "Our father wasn't the only one who kept you and Helen apart." Arthur frowned. "What do you mean?" Richard looked at the floor. I knew every letter was being hidden. I knew Helen cried herself to sleep. I knew you came looking for her." Arthur felt his heart sink. "Then why didn't you tell me?" Richard's voice trembled. "Because I was a coward. I was afraid of our father. I told myself I was protecting my family. But all I really protected was my own fear." He placed the leather bag on the table. "I've kept these for 45 years. Arthur slowly opened it. Inside were dozens of unopened letters. Every single one was addressed to him. Every single one had been written by Helen. Arthur carefully unfolded the first letter. The date read, April 18, 1981. His hands shook as he read. "Arthur, I know you haven't answered my last 3 letters. I refuse to believe you've forgotten us. I'll keep writing because hope is all I have left." Arthur closed his eyes. Tears streamed silently down his face. She had never stopped writing. He had simply never received them. For the next 3 hours, Arthur and Olivia read every letter together. Some spoke of ordinary days. Some described Olivia's first steps. Her first day of school. Her first bicycle. Her first piano recital. Each memory Arthur should have shared had been trapped inside that leather bag for decades. When the final letter was finished, no one spoke. Richard quietly stood. "I don't expect forgiveness." Arthur looked at him for a long moment. Then he walked across the room and hugged him. Richard burst into tears. "I don't deserve this," Arthur answered softly. "Maybe not, but I've spent too many years carrying pain. I'm not carrying it anymore." That evening, Michael, Emily, Daniel, and Olivia gathered for dinner. Arthur placed the letters on the table. "I've decided something." Michael looked concerned. "What is it?" Arthur smiled. "I'm writing a book." Emily laughed. "You?" Arthur nodded. "Not because I want people to know my story, but because somewhere, another father is sitting alone. Another daughter is searching for answers. If my story reminds even one family to choose love before pride, then every painful chapter will have been worth it." Olivia reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "I'll help you write every page." Arthur smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." Months later, the book was published. Its title was simple, One Empty Chair. No one expected much, but readers did. Letters arrived from every corner of the country. Parents reconciled with children. Brothers called brothers they hadn't spoken to in years. Families reunited after decades apart. Arthur read every message, personally. One evening, he smiled and whispered, "Helen, we did it." On Arthur's 72nd birthday, Helen's table looked very different from the lonely restaurant where his 70th birthday had begun. The dining hall overflowed with people. Volunteers, neighbors, children, former strangers who had become family. A huge banner hung across the room. "Happy birthday, Arthur." This time, no chair was empty. Michael stood to make a toast. 2 years ago, we almost lost the greatest man we've ever known, not because he died, but because we stopped seeing him. He turned toward his father. "Thank you for giving us another chance." Emily smiled through tears. "You taught us that family isn't something you inherit. It's something you choose every single day." Daniel raised his glass. "To Dad, and to Mom Helen, whose kindness changed all our lives." Everyone stood. Arthur looked around the room. His children, his grandchildren, Olivia, Richard, dozens of friends, hundreds of smiling faces. He remembered the lonely bench where this journey had begun. Then he smiled. Sometimes the worst day of your life becomes the first day of your best one. Arthur was now 73. Every morning, he still unlocked the doors of Helen's table before anyone else arrived. The building had grown far beyond anyone's expectations. What began as one small community dining hall had inspired similar centers in nearby towns. Volunteers from across the country visited to learn how kindness, not money, had built something so meaningful. Arthur always gave the same answer when reporters asked him the secret. It wasn't built with bricks. It was built with people who decided no one should feel forgotten. One crisp autumn morning, Olivia walked into Arthur's office holding a large envelope. "Dad, it came from a law firm." Arthur adjusted his glasses. "A law firm?" She nodded. "They've been trying to find you." Arthur opened the envelope. Inside was a letter informing him that an elderly woman named Margaret Wilson had recently passed away. He didn't recognize the name. But attached was another note. She asked that this be delivered only to Arthur Bennett. Arthur unfolded the handwritten page. "Dear Arthur, you don't know me personally. I was Helen's closest friend. For more than 40 years, I kept a promise I made to her. She asked me never to interfere with your new family. She wanted you to live without guilt. But she also told me that if fate ever reunited you and Olivia, I should give you this." Inside the envelope was a small velvet pouch. Arthur carefully opened it. A simple silver ring slipped into his hand. His eyes widened. It was the ring he had given Helen before leaving for military service. He had searched for it for years. He believed it had been lost forever. Wrapped around it was a tiny note in Helen's handwriting. "I never stopped wearing it in my heart." Arthur closed his eyes. For several moments, he couldn't speak. That evening, the whole family gathered at Helen's table. Arthur placed the ring in the center of the table. Olivia smiled through tears. "Mom kept her promise." Arthur nodded. "And now it's our turn." Michael asked quietly. "What promise?" Arthur looked around at everyone. "We promised that no one would ever feel abandoned the way I did. So we keep going. We keep opening new centers. We keep inviting strangers to become family. We never stop." Everyone nodded. No one questioned him. They all understood. Over the next 5 years, Helen's Table grew into a charitable foundation. More than 20 community dining centers opened across the country. Thousands of elderly people celebrated birthdays surrounded by friends instead of spending them alone. Children volunteered. After school, families reunited. Neighbors became lifelong companions. Every new center displayed the same message near its entrance. One chair is always waiting for someone who needs a family. On Arthur's 80th birthday, something extraordinary happened. Without telling him, Olivia, Michael, Emily, Daniel, and the grandchildren organized a surprise celebration. This time, there wasn't one birthday cake. There were 80. Each cake represented someone whose life Arthur had changed. One by one, people stepped forward. A young man who had once been homeless. An elderly widow who had found friendship again. A teenager Arthur had mentored years earlier, now a successful teacher. Each person shared a story. Each ended with the same words. "Thank you." Arthur listened with tears in his eyes. He had spent so many years believing his life had gone unnoticed. Now he realized something beautiful. Kindness is never wasted, even when no one thanks you immediately. As the evening came to an end, Olivia stood beside her father. "Dad, if you could relive your 70th birthday, would you change anything?" Arthur looked across the room. His children were laughing together. His grandchildren were serving cake to elderly guests. The hall echoed with warmth, music, and conversation. He smiled gently. "No." Olivia looked surprised. "Not even the part where you were left alone?" Arthur shook his head. "If that hadn't happened, I never would have met you. I never would have learned how precious time really is. And Helen's Table would never have existed." He looked toward Helen's photograph hanging on the wall. "Sometimes life breaks your heart, so it can open it even wider." Olivia hugged him tightly. "I love you, Dad." Arthur smiled. "I love you too, sweetheart." Outside, the evening sky was filled with stars. Inside, every chair was occupied. No one was alone, and the lonely old man who had once waited in silence on his 70th birthday finally understood that life's greatest gifts sometimes arrive long after we think the story is over. Arthur Bennett's lonely 70th birthday. Helen's Table had become a place of hope. Every morning, Arthur still greeted every guest with the same warm smile. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, a volunteer hurried into his office. "Mr. Bennett, there's a young man asking for you." Arthur looked up. "What's his name?" "He says his name is Ethan Carter." Arthur smiled politely. "Send him in." A nervous young man, no older than 22, stepped into the room. His clothes were soaked from the rain, and he held an old backpack tightly against his chest. The moment Arthur looked into his eyes, something felt strangely familiar. The young man swallowed hard. "Mr. Bennett." Arthur nodded. "Please, sit down." Instead, the young man remained standing. Then, in a trembling voice, he said words that stopped Arthur's heart. "I think you're my grandfather." The room fell completely silent. Arthur slowly stood. What did you say? The young man opened his backpack and carefully removed a faded photograph. It showed Olivia as a young woman, holding a baby wrapped in a blue blanket. Standing beside her was Helen. On the back of the photograph, written in Helen's handwriting, were the words, "For my grandson, so he'll always know where he came from." Arthur's hands began to shake. My grandson. The young man's eyes filled with tears. My mother was Olivia. Arthur stared at him in disbelief. What do you mean, was? The young man's voice cracked. My mother passed away 6 months ago. Arthur felt as though the ground had disappeared beneath him. His daughter, the daughter he had found after 45 years. Gone. No, Arthur whispered. No. That can't be true. The young man wiped away his tears. She never stopped talking about you. She told me, if life ever becomes too difficult, find your grandfather. He'll never turn you away. Arthur could no longer hold back his tears. He walked across the room and wrapped the young man in a tight embrace. You found me. The young man nodded. I didn't know where else to go. Arthur looked into his eyes. From today onward, you'll never have to wonder where you belong again. Just then, Michael, Emily, and Daniel entered the room after hearing the conversation. They froze. Arthur smiled through tears. I'd like you all to meet someone. This. He placed a loving hand on the young man's shoulder. Is your nephew. None of them had expected that even after all these years, Helen's final gift to the Bennett family had one more chapter waiting to be written. Arthur couldn't stop looking at the young man. Every feature reminded him of Olivia. The same gentle smile, the same kind eyes, the same quiet strength. He placed both hands on Ethan's shoulders. How old are you, son? 22. Arthur nodded slowly. That means, you were born long before Olivia found me. Yes. Ethan smiled sadly. Mom always wanted to meet you first. She said she wanted to know for herself what kind of man you were before introducing me. Arthur lowered his eyes. I wish she hadn't had to wait so long. So do I. The family gathered around the dining table at Helen's table. No one spoke for several moments. Finally, Emily asked gently, Ethan, what happened to Olivia? The young man's smile disappeared. Mom was diagnosed with an aggressive heart condition 2 years ago. She never wanted Grandpa to know. Arthur looked up in disbelief. Why? Because she said, your grandfather already lost 45 years with me. I won't let him spend the years we have left worrying every single day. Arthur covered his face. Tears slipped through his fingers. My little girl, I just found you. Ethan carefully reached into his backpack again. There is something else. He removed a small notebook wrapped in a blue cloth. It belonged to Mom. She told me to give it to you only after she was gone. Arthur accepted it with trembling hands. The first page contained only one sentence. Dad, thank you for making me feel like a daughter, even if only for a few years. Arthur's vision blurred. He turned the page. The notebook was filled with Olivia's handwritten memories. The first dinner they shared. Their fishing trips. The day Arthur taught her to build a birdhouse. The afternoon they planted roses for Helen. Every page ended the same way. Today I gained another beautiful memory with Dad. Arthur whispered. I didn't realize she remembered every little moment. Michael quietly replied, because to her, they weren't little. Near the end of the notebook was a sealed envelope. Arthur opened it carefully. Inside was Olivia's final letter. Dear Dad, if you're reading this, then I've already gone. Please don't let sadness become your final memory of me. You once told me that love isn't measured by how long we're together. It's measured by how deeply we change one another. You changed my life. You gave me the father I'd dreamed about since childhood. Please promise me one thing. Take care of Ethan the way you took care of me. Don't let him walk through life believing he's alone. And every year on your birthday, leave one empty chair at Helen's table. Someone out there will need it. Love always. Your daughter, Olivia. No one in the room could hold back their tears. Arthur folded the letter against his heart. I promise. I'll keep every promise. The following morning, Arthur asked Ethan to walk with him. Through the garden, they stopped beside the roses planted for Helen. Arthur smiled softly. Your mother loved these flowers. Ethan nodded. She told me they reminded her that beautiful things can grow after difficult seasons. Arthur looked toward the sunrise. She was right. After a long silence, Arthur asked, would you like to stay here? Ethan looked surprised. You mean, for a few days? Arthur smiled warmly. I mean, for as long as you want. Ethan's eyes immediately filled with tears. I've never really had a family. Arthur wrapped an arm around his shoulders. You do now. Over the next few months, Ethan became part of everyday life at Helen's table. He helped prepare meals. He repaired old furniture with Arthur. He played chess with elderly visitors. Soon, guests began smiling whenever they saw the two of them together. There go Grandpa and his grandson, they would say. Arthur loved hearing those words. Life had taken many years away from him. But somehow, it was still finding ways to give them back. On Arthur's 76th birthday, the dining hall was decorated with flowers, music, and photographs of every chapter of his journey. Just before dinner began, Ethan stood to speak. When my mother died, I believed I had lost my last family. Today I realize, she wasn't saying goodbye, she was leading me home. The room erupted into applause. Arthur stood and hugged his grandson tightly. Looking around the room, he noticed one chair remained empty, just as Olivia had asked. A few minutes later, the front door opened. An elderly woman stepped inside, looking uncertain. I'm sorry, I heard this place welcomes people who have nowhere else to celebrate. Arthur smiled and pointed to the empty chair. It has been waiting for you. The woman smiled through tears and took her seat. Arthur looked up toward Helen's photograph. Then toward Olivia's. Quietly, he whispered, we kept our promise. And in that moment, he knew their love would continue, not only through memories, but through every lonely person who found a family at